One eternity later.
Did you miss me?
It's been quite a while. So how's everything going? I was lying around meaninglessly, staring at the sky, thinking about life, its purpose, and how to make this so-called easy life even more complicated. And then, like divine intervention, a sacred thought crashed into my mind. Talk about DC Comics. I stood up in the name of all that's holy, and that's when it all began. Life. Shattered.
One of the most common beliefs people have about DC Comics is this: all the stories are from the same continuity. And that belief, it's the root of so many confusions about DC's timelines, characters, and especially its complex cosmology. Because in reality, not all stories follow the same line of continuity. Big changes have occurred over the years, and not every story picks up where the last one left off. Some stories are reboots, others are alternate universes, and some are just symbolic, metaphorical, or even meant to be standalone tales. Now, in recent years, especially after the release of the Metal series, the debate around DC continuity has gotten even louder and more heated. A lot of people think that Metal is just a continuation of everything that came before, particularly Final Crisis. They believe it's the next chapter, the next logical step in the cosmic story of DC. But according to the creators themselves, that's not exactly the case. The authors of Metal have said quite clearly, it's not a continuation. It's a rewrite, a new origin for DC Comics.
And definitely rewrite a lot of sort of mythology of the DCU. And I think ultimately this year I really fell in love again, going back and looking at a lot of Kirby and a lot of sort of seminal stories that I loved as a child, both at Marvel and DC. I studied a lot of events, and a lot of big stories, from Infinity Gauntlet to Blackest Night, all over the place, and Crisis on Infinite Earths, and those stories, what I realized they have in common is that they're daring, and they're not afraid to redo creation myths. They're not afraid to say, this is where we thought the boundaries of our imagination were when it came to this universe, and then pushing past it, saying there's a fourth world, and there's a source wall, and there's a presence, and all of this crazy stuff, and then saying what's beyond.
It was meant to reshape and redefine the lore, not just build upon what was already there. Still, many fans insist that Metal was just a retcon, a way to alter or reshape older stories, while technically keeping them in the same narrative timeline. But is that really what happened? Let's dig a little deeper.
And here we go.
During the Metal era, a comic called Justice League Odyssey came out, and it introduced something very interesting, a creature named Eschaton. It was foretold that the Eschaton will come when it is the end of the fourth world. Eschaton is a cosmic being that feeds on the corpses of the new gods after the end of the fourth world. So when the source wall breaks and Perpetua is released from her cosmic prison, we see the total erasure of New Genesis and Apocalypse. The homeworlds of the new gods are simply gone, wiped from existence. And that's when Eschaton appears. The story makes it very clear. Eschaton arrives at the end of the fourth world, and since he shows up just after the source wall is shattered, it implies that the fourth world was still active during the events of Metal. Now that brings us to the big contradiction. Do you know what was officially considered the ending of the fourth world in DC Comics? It was Final Crisis. Final Crisis wasn't just a major event. It was a symbolic and literal conclusion to the saga of the new gods. It was about the fall of the fourth world, the rise of the fifth world, and the transformation of existence itself. Characters like Darkseid and Orion met their destinies. The cosmic order was fundamentally reshaped. So if Metal takes place after Final Crisis, how is the fourth world still alive and kicking? It shouldn't be. That world was supposed to be over. Done. Replaced. According to the timeline we get from Justice League Odyssey, the fourth world ends after the source wall breaks. But that directly contradicts Final Crisis, which ended that era years before. So we're left with only two real possibilities. One, Metal somehow takes place before Final Crisis, which makes absolutely no sense given the characters, the narrative tone, and the cosmic events involved. Or metal exists in a different continuity, one that's not bound by what happened in Final Crisis. And this is what many fans either don't know or don't want to accept.
Why? 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 Why?
That these stories, as epic and interconnected as they may seem, are sometimes meant to stand apart. They're different interpretations, different takes, different timelines, and yet fans try to make it all fit. Because we all want a unified story, right? We want the puzzle pieces to come together perfectly. But with DC, sometimes it's better to think of the multiverse not just as a narrative tool, but as a publishing reality. Different eras, different writers, different visions. Even Grant Morrison, who wrote Final Crisis, has talked about this. His view of continuity is that it's fluid, flexible. The idea is that everything happened somewhere, somehow, but not necessarily in the same world or timeline. The stories shifting, overlapping, sometimes contradicting themselves.
And it was like a kind of junction, like a train junction, where these lines, each of which represented different universes, meaning different comic books that contradicted one another, they could all run parallel, and sometimes they crossed over. Sometimes that Batman who didn't agree with that Batman agreed with him here and fed in a little bit more. So although Frank Miller's Dark Knight didn't actually fit into canon with Batman, what it did was feed some of its energy into the main Batman line to reinvigorate it. So I'd created this big kind of diagram that was like a loom. And then I thought, okay, if that's all the comics, and in fact even on that line you can have the Marvel Comics line running along here, and sometimes
So when someone tells you that Metal and Final Crisis are part of the same continuity, ask them this: how can the fourth world still be going after it already ended? How can a new origin fit inside a conclusion? This isn't a tiny inconsistency, not just a plot hole. That's a full-on rewrite. It redefines the way we look at these stories. In the end, it all comes down to perspective.
First arc, I mean, it's same feeling. Court of Owls was like, they're gonna figure out that I'm not supposed to be here, so I'm just gonna swing for the fence and then just like never get another chance. And it wasn't until after really after Death of the Family where I started to build outwards, where I knew I had a second part to that story with Endgame, and I was like, you know, I'm just gonna assume maybe they're gonna keep me for a while, and then start building outwards, like build my own kind of mythos, which is something that Grant had been encouraging me to do from when I started. And he was always very kind to me, you know, on the books, and was always giving me advice. And that was one of the things he said, where he was like, the way to get over your fear is to give your version of Batman a beginning and an end, so that you have yours encapsulated. And I didn't start to do that though until the third year in the Gotham. And then I started to feel like, okay, you know, if they fire me, they fire me, but I'm going to build outwards. And that's when I started to get the idea when I was doing 0 Year for Last Night. So that was originally planned back then. And, you know, Metal started to come around when I was thinking about, when I was working on Endgame a bit. And so it was all, and I still have stuff that I'd love to go back and do, like, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff, from Son of the Joker stuff to all nutty stuff that, you know, I don't know if I'll ever do it, you know, because I'm really kind of moving away.
If you're someone who wants one single timeline to make sense of it all, DC might frustrate you. But if you're someone who embraces the multiverse, the layers, the rewrites, and the reimaginings, then you can appreciate what Metal and Final Crisis each bring to the table, even if they don't line up perfectly. One is a rewrite, the other a conclusion, and both can coexist as long as we accept they're not telling the same story. Thanks for watching. Until next time, God bless you.